Hello, Timmies and Tammies everywhere. I'm PotatoWhiskers, and welcome back to Timmy Time. Today, I'm going to be talking about one of the most hated and inconsistent decks in my playgroup, my Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger Commander deck. Personally, I'm a huge fan of tribal and theme decks, so an entirely colorless Eldrazi deck is something that's right up my alley. And while there are definitely better builds out there, I chose to stick to an almost strict diet of Eldrazi creatures and ramping artifacts and lands. So let's take a look. First, I'd like to go into what I'm affectionately going to call my Timmy Top 3. For each Commander deck video, these will be my top 3 favorite creatures that I love to see out on the field, always excluding my Commander. For this deck, my Timmy Top 3 are Breaker of Armies, Eldrazi Devastator, and Desolation Twin. Each of these does something so simple and yet so effective. Breaker of Armies forces blockers, Eldrazi Devastator has trample, and Desolation Twin brings 2 bodies for the price of 1. Take that, spot removal. Moving on to our main body of creatures, let's talk about the Swarm. Of course, both Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, and Kozilek the Great Distortion are coming to the party. Both are 12/12 bodies. Butcher of Truth gets us 4 cards on cast and has Annihilator 4, and Kozilek the Great Distortion gets us back up to 7 cards in hand, has Menace, and lets us counter spells by discarding cards equal to the target's converted mana cost. Ulamog the Infinite Gyre has a lot of similarities to his future self, but instead of losing 20 cards from your library, you just have to deal with Annihilator 4 again. Last of the legendary Eldrazi we can legally use is Emrakul the Promised End, and we can't talk about that card without talking about today's sponsor, the number 13, because Emrakul is a 13 mana 13/13, so someone is definitely going home unlucky. She costs 1 less to cast for each card type in our graveyard, and if flying and trample weren't enough, she also has protection from instants, and we get to control one of our opponents for a sort of faux turn before they get to try and recover from our shenanigans. Moving a little faster now to our other big boys in no particular order, we have Void Winnower, who takes away at least half of our opponent's casting and blocking privileges, Spawn Sire of Ulamog to spawn more bodies, and Ruin Processor, the red-headed stepchild of this deck. Pathrazer of Ulamog, because things are best lost in 3s, It That Betrays to take those 3 lost things, and Deceiver of Form to turn said things into nice big Eldrazi. Ulamog's Crusher, Bane of Balaged, and Artisan of Kozilek round it all off with the ability to get rid of 2 permanents on attack. These guys make up the upper echelons of our deck. In other words, these sluggers are our goal. But what about some more mid-range and cheap creatures? Well, for that we've got, again, in no particular order, Blight Herder to make babies for mana, Kozilek's Channeler to tap for mana, and Deathless Behemoth to hopefully keep annoying our opponents. Ulamog's Despoiler has the potential to enter as a 9/9, Endbringer will always be untapped and has a few useful abilities, and Kozilek's Pathfinder can skirt around big blockers. Reality Smasher has some serious aggression and staying power, Oblivion Sower can steal some lands from an opponent, and Walker of the Waste just gets bigger the more basic waste we have. Transitioning now with Endless One, who is limited only by our mana base, but usually comes out with about 4 or 5 counters in the games that I've drawn in. The final and smallest segment of our swarm are our supportive skittering boys, like Eldrazi Mimic, who is consistently inconsistent, Matter Reshaper, who can help us get out smaller artifacts if we're lucky, and Eternal Scourge, another creature that refuses to die. Thought Not Seer is like Solemn Simulacrum if it channeled Spite instead of Loneliness, and Warden of Geometries, who can attack and then help us cast on main phase number 2. These guys hopefully give us some early game presence to block or bide time until we can ramp up. Leading us to our next section, Rocks and Ramp. So, on our first turn we might draw a hand with Eldrazi Temple, Soul Ring, and Hedron Crawler, putting us in a good spot for our first couple of turns. Alternatively, we might end up with a couple basic wastes, a Palladium Mire, Scorched Ruins, and a Terrain Generator. Later on, drawing into Temple of the False God or Shrine of the Forsaken Gods can be really useful as well. To help pump our mana even higher, we have a selection of mana rocks that all conveniently cost 4 mana for whatever reason. Hedron Archive, Urgolem's Eye, Sisay's Ring, and Thran Dynamo, the first 3 tapping for 2, while the Dynamo taps for 3. Everflowing Chalice makes a good low-cost option if we don't have any other choices, or a great high-cost option if we do. And Dreamstone Hedron and Gilded Lotus are both powerful late or mid-game rocks. Our last rock is more of a door, really, and that's Azor's Gateway, and it has 1 and tap. Draw a card, then exile a card from your hand. If cards with 5 or more different converted mana costs are exiled with Azor's Gateway, you gain 5 life, untap Azor's Gateway, and transform it. Once it flips, we get into the fun stuff with Sanctum of the Sun, a legendary land that lets us add X mana of any one color, where X is our life total. That's a lot of mana, but what if ramp isn't enough? Well, in that case, we have a couple of cost-reducing ways to get our big sluggers out more reliably. Eye of Ugin is a great way to not only reduce the cost of Eldrazi spells, but also provides a way to seek out our power players. Herald's Horn and Urza's Incubator are both great 3-mana artifacts that reduce the cost of our Swarm, with the Horn adding a chance at getting an extra card at the beginning of our upkeep. Ugin the Ineffable also helps out not only our Eldrazi, but all colorless spells we cast. Spoiler alert, they're all colorless, including our lovely artifacts, and the added ability to destroy colored permanents makes it that much better. Next, let's dive into a couple more devious ways to gain the advantage with Quicksilver Amulet and Planar Bridge. These are both great ways to sneak out creatures from our hand or library respectively, and while Geode Golem is a fun card to use to get a free first Ulamog, it's even better for that 2 or 4 mana cast later in the game. And Mystic Forge gives us the ability to sneak a peek at the top card of our library, and even cast it if it's colorless non-land card. Again, spoiler alert, and while it isn't as powerful as Scry, we do have the option to tap the Forge and pay 1 life to exile that top card to dig for what we need. I couldn't find a fancy name for the next 2 cards, so I'm just going to call them what they are, Hate Bait. And those cards are Vidalcan Orrery and Ugin the Spirit Dragon. First, casting everything at instant speed? Yes please, I'll take my instant speed 10 mana 2 permanent exile from the command zone, thank you very much. As far as Ugin goes, he just has so many uses. He's basically the Swiss Army knife of any EDH deck that can afford 8 mana. 3 damage to any target, spot exile, and a game-winning ult make for a card that doesn't usually last a rotation without some spicy politics. Now, once we have all those creatures on board, we need to make sure they can kill. You know, like, harder. So our next trio of artifacts do just that. Vanquisher's Banner gives our creatures +1/+1, makes casting creatures more beneficial by netting us a card. Eldrazi Monument gives our Swarm +1/+1, flying and indestructible with the price of 1 sacrifice at the beginning of our upkeep. And last of the 3, we have the Immortal Sun, which... Really, what doesn't this card do? I mean, players can't activate Planeswalker abilities, we get an additional card on our draw step, all of our spells are reduced by 1 to cast. Oh, and our creatures get +1/+1 as well, if that wasn't already enough. Next up, I'd like to talk about some cards that, good or not, I gotta include in a segment I'm calling Flavor Saver. All is Dust, Eldrazi Conscription, and Not of This World are 3 gimmies because they're all tribal spells, my favorite types of spells, the ones with creature types. All is Dust lays down the red carpet for a win, Conscription can help nuke an opponent with commander damage and Annihilator, and Not of This World gives us one of those disgusting counterspells for the best price, 1 big boy on board. These next 3 are kind of like the diet versions of the tribal trio. Perilous Vault lets us mass exile all non-land permanents. Hedron Matrix is an artifact equipment that gets more useful the bigger CMC of the creature it's on. And Warping Whale gives us a couple non-counter options, with the price being we can only counter a sorcery spell. And these next 3 cards give us a little bit more of that H.P. Lovecraft style world warping madness we all love so much, with Scour from Existence, Titan's Presence, and Gruesome Slaughter. I'm reaching a little bit with that last one since it just lets our Eldrazi kill the old-fashioned way, but all 3 let us get rid of things in a particularly Eldrazi fashion, so it's okay. Covering our last few, we have Spatile Contortion for some last resort instant speed action, Tamiyo's Journal of Eldrazi Secrets for the free clues and a tutor if we can bide enough time, and lastly we have Spawning Beds so that we can release some more skittery boys if we need some bodies in a pinch. Finally, we'll cover the remaining non-basic lands we didn't go over already, starting with the Urza trio. If all 3 are in your starting hand, you can be sure that you're either going to have a lot of fun or none at all. Radiant Fountain gives us 2 life when it enters the battlefield, Tomb of the Spirit Dragon does 1 better and gains us 1 life for each of our colorless creatures with a low price of 2 mana and tapping the land, and Sanctum of Ugin, which says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but bear with me, as soon as you cast your first big boy, go search your library for yet another even bigger boy. So that's nice. Gaia Reach Sanitarium, besides making me want to listen to a Metallica song from 1986, lets every player draw a card, then discard a card. And Zalfirin Void lets us scry 1 on ETB. Thespian Stage and Vesuva finally allow us to copy any of the above. And with that, I've covered every card included besides the basic wastes. Thank you for watching this episode of Timmy Time. If you have any feedback you want to share, or you want to share your own Timmy Top 3, then leave a comment wherever YouTube says the comment section is now, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Again, I'm PotatoWhiskers, and I'll see you in the next one.